I started reading The Prophets by Robert Jones Jr. And so far, I'm like 48, 49 pages in. Actually, I almost thought I was like 15 pages in. It feels slow for me. I just came off of reading The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. There was an engagingness to Underground Railroad that worked for me, that resonated with me because it was just very straightforward to the point. There was still prose, and I felt like with this book, in the middle of like learning this new character, I'm also getting like a lot of other musings in their head and wrapped up in like getting to know them, but it leaves me clouded about them. It had one part that I noticed in this book where something happens with a pinprick and there's kind of like a musing about the pinprick and what it means and all that stuff, and it's like I just met them and I barely understand what all of this is supposed to mean. Some of the scenes feel a little drawn out and filled up with deeper meanings and emotions that I'm not connecting to completely. I don't know, maybe it's just me because I think it's more of a personal thing to me. There was one portion where it's like one character is in the kitchen making food. We're getting to know them. We're in this scene, but also we're like kind of going off daydreaming into something else. I should like that because apparently I like tangents, but it's like these tangents are going and then they come back and then I feel like I'm confused about where I'm at and what's going on right now. When are we getting to the inciting incident? So far, it feels like a slice of life. A slice of life on a slave plantation. I'm not sure if it's a plantation or we'll just call it a slave property because I'm not sure if it's a farm or whatever, but it's a slave property or a slavery property. I don't know. So far, it's just been slice of life and we're getting to know the characters and it's dragging for me. There are moments that I love in here. Like one passage that I read that was just like, this is beautiful right here. Samuel shook his head and Isaiah smiled at that too. Isaiah put down his pails, walked over and touched Samuel's arm. He slid his hand down until their hands were joined. Isaiah squeezed and eventually Samuel squeezed back. It's like I just pictured that and I just like I felt it. Like I could see them. He's just sliding his hand down Samuel's arm and then they lock fingers and then they like squeeze. Like I saw that and I felt that. I thought that was such a beautiful piece of writing. Like that is just so visual and so captivating and so warm and tender and beautiful. And I was just like, oh, I like this. I like this. This is cute. And that's another thing I like to say. Like all of the more intimate, sexual, sexy scenes are pretty much brief and almost kind of told in like memories. But it's just like how it was done. It's just, you felt it. I was just like, are my loins wet? It's cute. Like, for something that's not super explicit, it's written in this way that just makes it, oh my gosh, hot. Like, I don't know, it's hot for me. It's hot for me, okay? I feel like I could do it a little bit more of that until we get to a huge inciting incident. I don't know if there's going to be an inciting incident going on in this, but, you know, until we get to a turning point, can we get a little bit more of the action, honey? I want that. Another scene I really loved too was Isaiah turned on his side but said nothing. He looked in the direction of Samuel's voice and tried to differentiate his shape from the surrounding darkness. It was all one endless mass until Samuel moved and delineated the living from the dead. I love that visual. I know I'm just like about the poetry, like I'm not enjoying the more prosy poetic writing, but I do love a good turn of phrase and a good like visual. I love that. This paragraph really hit for me. Samuel sucked his teeth, but returned to his position, lying next to Isaiah. Just as he got comfortable, the scratching noise returned. He didn't hear it, but Isaiah looked in the direction it was coming from, close to the horse pens. Something took shape there. It was first a tiny point, like a star, and then it spread until it was the night he was brought to the plantation. This kind of felt like it felt like a hallucination, but it also, I don't think it was a hallucination. It just felt like how it was conveyed. It gave me cinematic, it gave me movie, it gave me like, if you saw this in a movie, you'd be like confused, but then you'd get it. I love that, the beauty of that writing. I love the imagination in that writing, like making it very cinematic. I don't know, so far I'm just like, honestly mixed feelings because I'm loving certain things and I'm just kind of like I feel a smidge confused about things, but I'm only 49 pages in, so let's see what it's looking at 100 pages. I think there should be more clarity by then, I'm expecting. Okay, so this is different. I know, it's like, I guess it's a little bit more intimate, I suppose. How many pages am I in? Oh no, I'm not there. I'm a little further along. Yeah, I am at 60, 61. Oh, I'm still really very slow with this. In the process of reading this, a lot of what he's bringing up right now is the relationship between black men and black women within the black community. And in this, I'm like reading a moment where, oh, let me read it, child. Let me read it real quick for y'all. Here's what Sis said. Sis said, the knife was damp and glistening. For a moment, it crossed her mind that the barn had all manner of sharp objects. There were axes and pitchforks, but also the blunt edge of a hoe or shovel that, with great force behind it, could also be useful. She looked around the barn, ignoring Isaiah, Samuel, Solomon, the animals, the insects, the smell, but not the various shaped objects that hung on the walls or leaned against them. Why hadn't the men gathered these things, placed them in a pile in the center of a circle, where they could choose the tool to which they were most accustomed? But it had to be all of them, at once, because bullets were quick and would take them down. The guns can take out every one of them, however, in that was the chance. It wasn't like any of them wanted to do any harm, though they would be well within their rights to do so if they did. Sold off loved ones alone made that righteous. They just wanted to be somewhere free, and free of. But I will be back with more thoughts if need be. Progress report. I am like, what is it, 340 pages into this book. Ooh, child, it's been a while since I have updated how I felt about this book. Partly because it's just a writing that does not click for me because it's very poetic. And I do see where he is inspired, like, because he is son of Baldwin. He is very inspired by James Baldwin in that way. His writing definitely showed that he spent time and energy and effort in his writing of this book. Like, from my understanding, he took 10 years to write it, and it is beautifully written. It's just that how it's beautifully written isn't necessarily my style of writing. I think it's for a lot of other people who love poetry like that. Not your girl over here. Besides that, I think it's a really beautiful story so far. It's been a beautiful story. Like, a lot of, like, since I've read it, a lot of stuff happened. I do think for a significant portion of the book, maybe about half to 3/4 of the book, it's been a lot of character development, a lot of setting the scene, a lot of setting up characters and kind of letting you get acquainted with them. Then a big dramatic thing just kind of hits you out of the blue. That starts unfolding, and I'm just looking forward to seeing how this is going to end. I feel like I've been trying to get to the end of this book for a while, and it's been hard to get to it because of the writing. How much beautiful writing are we gonna get through before we actually get to some more, like, big moment? For me, it gets a little tedious because I do think I allegedly have ADHD. We'll see. I still have to get tested. That's why it's alleged. It's got great characters. I do think I really love Maggie as a character. I love Samuel and Isaiah's relationship. I loved that. I thought it was beautiful. I love descriptions of them. I love their romance, their sexuality. It was still very steamy without actually showing us anything. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this ends. And it's so interesting that the 2 books that I read prior to this, I read Kindred and I read The Underground Railroad. They both included, like, these magical realism, these more than just the natural aspects to the story. And this book does incorporate some magical realism in there quite a bit. Some of it's not very clear. I think there are, like, chapters with these, like, I don't know if they're ancestors or they are, like, Orisha gods. I don't know who they are, but they are, like, these voices, these 7 that are, like, speaking from a different place, that are kind of, like, talking about and to Black people and kind of, like, addressing what they're going through, their plight in slavery. So I'm looking forward to finishing this. I will try to finish this today. Finally wrap this book up because it's been a while and I'm ready to read something else. I am ready to get out of the time of slavery. Just get out of slavery, period, you know? Okay, so, progress report. Either way, it doesn't matter. I finished reading the book. It was a very powerful ending, but I think a lot of the ending, over my head, just, like, fly over, like, estate, just flew right over it. I don't think I understood some of what the deeper themes and meanings. I just wanted to share some of the beautiful writing. Although some of it I did not fully connect to or understand. Some of it, like, I just thought was like very visual and very beautiful. And I actually realized that Maggie in this book reminds me of Aunt Millicent in An Unkindness of Ghosts. This was a moment with Maggie. I do think Maggie's one of my favorite characters in the book. I think she might be my main favorite character, only favorite character. I don't know. I really liked her a lot more. Like, everybody else is kind of like, they were cool, but I didn't really love them or connect to them. But it's like Maggie, I don't know, there was something I loved about her. Like, there was just a revolutionary spirit in her that I loved. And then there's also like this mystical, magical thing with her too, so I love that about her. But it had this moment from Maggie's perspective. The youngins ran around the plantation, in and out of the stables, hiding in the cotton field, busy as manure flies. Their darting, naughty heads were unaware of the special hell tailored for each of them. They were foolish, helpless, and unlovable. But whatever loathing Maggie felt for them was mitigated by what she knew they would one day endure. That was one of the moments that I just had to tell, because I was just like, there was something about how that was written and just like the visual of it, and then the emotion and the thoughts and the deeper meanings in that. Just like, I had to tab it. Like, I didn't even understand why I was tabbing it. I didn't know what the full thoughts were behind that, but I just knew that, like, I love how this was written. I know it. I understand it. I connect to it. This is another one. Men were bluster. Endless, preening bluster that needed, more than anything in the world, encouragement through audience. For men, privacy was the most frightening thing in the world, because what was the point of doing anything that couldn't be revered? What difference did it make to stand on a pedestal when there was no one to look up? Women, most women, did it differently. Privacy allowed them the power to be cruel, but regarded as kind, to be strong and be thought delicate. It was crucial, though, that she be alone in this, for men were liable, even in these spaces, to snatch from her these tiny moments of a more balanced nature and bloom. Men, it seemed, were built for the sake of catastrophe and more determined to be who they were built to be. Oh, I love this moment, too. Fuck glory. Give us what's ours by right, and what's ours by right is our skin tint, skin, our breath scent, breath, our eye blink, our feet steps. Who broke the covenant with creation such that a person could be a cow or a carriage? Release yourself from that low-down place where another's pain is your fortune. Get up, you hear me? Cleanse your outhouse spirit and set yourself to leave us be. Otherwise, you leave us no choice. I'm just like, oh, tell you, the writing. This was one moment that was just such an internally black moment, where it was just like, from the indistinguishable masses of black niggerdom, Isaiah and Samuel had grown to the peak state of brawn, which is what Paul had intended from the start, by placing them both in the toil of the barn. It just felt black, very black to me. Another thing that really kind of hit on this page, niggers never had any loyalty to one another. That was what saved them from threat. No way would it have been possible to yoke them and drag them across widest oceans, then stretch after stretch of green meadow and forest, hill behind hill, to sugar cane, to indigo, to tobacco, to cotton and more, without the kin treachery of which only they seemed capable. It was intense. This was one thing that I really felt and came away with after really experiencing the time of slavery through these books. Niggas weren't lazy. Niggas were tired. Bone tired. And when they finally weren't anymore, fire. That's so true, because it's like, after reading Kindred and then reading The Underground Railroad and now this, I'm just like, black people are tired, okay? We're tired. We get mentally, emotionally, and physically drained by this like society that we're living in. Oh, and another one that really hit. Ooh, this one really hit. To survive in this place, you had to want to die. That was the way of the world, as remade by Tubob, otherwise known as white people. And Samuel's list of grievances was long. They pushed people into the mud and then called them filthy. They forbade people from accessing any knowledge of the world and then called them simple. They worked people until their empty hands were twisted, bleeding, and could do no more, then called them lazy. They forced people to eat innards from troughs and then called them uncivilized. They kidnapped babies and shattered families and then called them incapable of love. They raped and lynched and cut up people into parts and then called the pieces savage. They stepped on people's throats with all their might and asked why the people couldn't breathe. And then, when people made an attempt to break the foot or cut off one, they screamed chaos and claimed that mass murder was the only way to restore order. He had a lot of like very poignant and rich text in this book. I have to read this one. Victors gave themselves the right to rename murder triumph and adorn themselves with jewelry made from the bones of the vanquished. And finally, this part kind of shook me a little bit. Let me just read it real quick. James let out the breath he didn't even know he was holding as everything around him slowed to a crawl. I thought it was just a young adult thing, letting out the breath that you didn't know you were holding. Or maybe just a romance, young adult thing. I thought it was just that, but I'm assuming it's like letting out that breath you didn't know you were holding was just like this. Every genre, it doesn't matter. Everybody's can let out a breath that they didn't know they were holding all over the place. Or is this like an agreed upon thing that people must do? At the end, he did acknowledgements and like I did not realize he was Jan fam. He is a part of the Janet Jackson like fandom, and I'm just like, come on. I like you, Robert. I like you a lot. I think you're amazing. Like, you're a Janet Jackson fan. And he thanked Janet at the end. He checked the Janet Jackson fan, and I was like, girl, shout out to him. I like Robert. I definitely want to look at more reviews, see what other people thought about it. And with that, I decided to defer to Jonathan at To Be Black in Love, his review of The Prophets. So I'm going to sit down and watch that and compare our thoughts and also kind of see what I learned from his reading of it. Thank you for spending your time with me, and I am out this bitch like Fleek. The fuck? Shout out to Peaches.